Hi, everybody. Oh, perfect. Okay. Jordan and I are really excited to be here today to talk about LinkedIn. And I'm actually going to jump to the next slide. So this is kind of what we're going to go over today. We're going to start with some introductions on who we are, and then Jordan's going to jump into creating an online image, what that looks like, why it's important. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about LinkedIn at a high level and what it is as a platform, why it's important again. And then my favorite part, we're going to go through a tutorial of actually each part of the profile and kind of some tips and tricks that we've found as far as how to make the most of each section. And then at the end, we're happy to answer any questions you guys have or anything that you're curious about. So with that, we'll jump to introductions. And I'll actually let Jordan, if you want to introduce yourself first, go for it.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Gretch. So I'm Jordan Askijan, and I graduated from Mizzou in December of 2019, and I was a business marketing major, and I had a minor in psychology and then got the multicultural studies certificate. And I'm currently working at H&R Block as a part of their rotational financial analyst program, and I'm located in Kansas City, Missouri.
Awesome. And I'm Gretchen Metzger. I graduated in May of 2019, which feels like so long ago now. It's crazy. I was a business marketing major with a multicultural studies certificate as well. And I'm currently working at Hallmark Cards in Kansas City, Missouri, as a marketing specialist. And I interned for them on the social media team. So LinkedIn is close to my heart for sure. But then since have worked in email marketing and direct mail marketing too. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Jordan to actually jump into kind of creating an online image and what that means.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you, Gretchen. If you want to pop over to the next slide, Gretchen and I did a little bit of research to get started, and we created this rough little timeline for you guys so we can visually see and kind of better understand the power of the internet and just how quickly things have changed in such a short period of time. So on like the far left-hand corner of the screen, you guys can see that little telephone image, and that was created in 1876, followed by the telegraph just a few years later. And then 100 years later, we have a bit of a jump, and we can see that the internet was born. So the birthday of the internet is actually considered to be January 1st of 1983. And when we go a little bit to the right of that, we have LinkedIn, and then Facebook, and then Instagram, and good old TikTok most recently. So it's kind of crazy to think that the internet, if we do some quick math, it's only 38 years old. So that's like younger than most of our parents. Like if we think about how old like Zac Efron and Taylor Swift are, like the internet's a relatively like new thing. So when we think about how we get information now, like you might be subscribed to like different email subscriptions like the Skim or the Morning Brew, or you might scroll through Instagram or Twitter in the morning to get your news. And when people were getting their information as early as like 50 years ago, that just like wasn't a thing. When people got information 50, 100 years ago, it looked a lot different because the technology just wasn't the same. So people had like physical newspapers that were actually delivered to their house, or they wrote letters to one another. Like if we think back to high school when you learned about like the Pony Express, or like when people had a town square that they would go to share information. And like on Mizzou's campus, that might be like speaker circle where people are like shouting information to each other, and it's just totally a word of mouth thing. So Gretchen, I'll have you flip to the next slide, and we have a little quote here from Bill Gates, and he says, "The internet is becoming the town square for the global village of tomorrow." And we just thought this was a really great quote that kind of captured, you know, how things were then, how things are now, and then what things will look like a few decades from now or 100 years from now. Like it's just kind of insane to think about how powerful it all is. So if you want to flip to the next slide, Gretch. Online image is one of the things we wanted to talk about before we kind of dug into LinkedIn, because your online image is another thing that's really powerful. So we have the definition up here for you guys. Online image is how you present yourself in a virtual space. And so we should just really be thinking about these things. Like, what do our profiles look like on our social media accounts? What are our pictures that we're posting, the experiences that we're sharing, the verbiage and the language that we're using, and the things that, you know, even the things that you like and the things that you're showing support for. These are all things that we need to be like kind of intentional about and mindful of. And it's also a good thing to keep in mind, like the intended audience of these things. So your friends, your family, your future employers, recruiters, professors, whoever. And lastly, just kind of thinking about how you want to show others who you are. So you'll see this in a moment when Gretchen and I kind of share our own profiles from LinkedIn, but no two profiles are exactly alike. And it's really important. And one of the things we want to hit on is that your platform and your program on social media, on your LinkedIn, it should be unique to you. And it should kind of represent who you are and your experiences and your values. So we'll flip to the next slide really quick. Thanks, Gretch. The last thing we want to touch on before we dig into the LinkedIn section is just understanding digital footprint. So again, we have the definition up here for you guys, and I can read it. It's a trail of data that you create while using the internet. So it includes the websites you visit, the emails you send, and the information you submit to online services. So when we talked about the power of the internet a second ago, like what you put out there stays out there. And that's probably stuff that you guys all know and have heard before. But we just want to like slide it in there one more time. Like things can always be tracked back to you. So like the websites you visit, the pictures you post, the messages you send, like those things aren't ever like completely erased. So we just need to be mindful of and just aware of the footprint that we're placing and the trail that you're leaving behind you. So I think with that, if we want to hit it to the next slide, now that we've covered the basics, I'm going to pass it over to Gretch so she can get us introduced to LinkedIn.
Perfect. Thanks, Jordan. Okay, so just wanted to briefly go over, I'm sure everybody's familiar with LinkedIn, but just in case you aren't, it is the world's largest professional online network. And I would say what you probably first think of is the connections and maybe even the groups that you can be a part of, but we're excited to kind of dig into all the different facets as the company has really grown and expanded even what's just offered within the LinkedIn site. So with that, I also wanted to share the statistic that there's actually 722 million members as of January 2021. So to put that in perspective, I have a note here. Instagram has 1 billion and Facebook has 2.7 billion. So obviously a little bit less, but I think this is definitely an audience worth noticing, and one that can be really, really helpful to you as far as professional networking and jobs and internship searching. So jumping to the next slide. So just overall with LinkedIn, again, wanted to hit on kind of at a high level, it's really great with finding those jobs, internships, just different opportunities in general. That's kind of the first place people look, as well as professional mentorship. I think everybody thinks of, you make your connections and your circles, but through that, you can actually make mentors that might not even live anywhere close to you. And through different direct messages, you can kind of set those up, and we'll talk about that later too. And then organize and join groups. This is a really great way to join, whether it's a group of people interested in the industry you're a part of, or this is where I think too, a lot of people might think, well, I'm not necessarily a business major. I don't think LinkedIn applies to me, but these groups are really, really great for connecting in with people who have similar interests, or you could share resources between. And then writing posts. So this includes both maybe an announcement that you got an internship or a post about something relating to your industry that you're in. So there's a lot of really great opportunities to be creative with the site as well. So we'll jump to the next. So if you're sitting here thinking, oh my goodness, I don't have a LinkedIn at all, do not fret. We will walk you through it. But kind of how you start is you set up a profile, and then the next step, it walks you really easily step by step, but then building your network. Here, I just wanted to hit on, I think everybody has a personal preference with how public you want to be with people that you accept or that you connect with. But I would say something that actually came up this morning, my manager and I were talking, and I had mentioned I had this presentation, and she shared in her job search, looking for a candidate to fill a role under her that she's trying to hire. She actually has been looking for people who have a mutual second degree connection, because those people pop up first and she messages those first. So I would be mindful of, you want to strike the right balance of, you don't want to obviously connect with everybody and anybody, but you also want to be mindful of more connections will actually boost you higher when recruiters are looking for different keywords or different things like that. And then additionally, finding that job or internship, and we'll kind of show some of that as well. And LinkedIn has really great services as far as Even just if you're not interested in looking for a job or internship and you have something secured, it's really great with looking at skills that maybe you want to aspire to have or grow to have in different jobs. And then participating in conversations, like I mentioned, and then posting content. So definitely is a fun way to get involved and start to interact with your peers. So I'll jump to the next slide. So here we're actually going to jump into the true tutorial where we walk through each part of the profile, and I'm going to pass it to Jordan to kind of start here.
Yeah, awesome. So if you want to flip to the next slide, we kind of thought that the best way to show you guys LinkedIn was just to put our own profiles on there and stick them in there so you can see the similarities and the differences side by side and understand all of the elements. So this is just the very baseline, like the header of what you see right when you log in. So if any of you guys went to LinkedIn right now and you searched Gretchen or I's name and clicked on it, like this is what you would see. So you've got a cover photo, a profile picture, the role or the employer underneath the name, and then how many connections the person has, and then off to the right, like the school that they attended, and then again, like the employer. And so like for me, I work at H&R Block, and so sometimes companies will provide like different header photos that you can use. And so H&R Block gave all of like us these little downloadable images that were PDFs that I thought were cool. And so I put mine on my LinkedIn, so it says Block Proud, KC Proud. And that just kind of shows anybody who looks at my profile like, oh, she works for H&R Block and it's located in Kansas City. So like right off the bat, people know, oh, like in, you know, a 10-second glance, these are like some of the highlights about what she's doing, what she's involved in the business world. And so another thing that Gretchen and I wanted to kind of hit on is like, okay, so what does this look like for you guys? You know, your students are like, I don't work at H&R Block or Hallmark, like what do I put there? And honestly, like it's the cool thing about stuff like this is it's so up to you. Like it's unique to you, it's your own thing, like whatever you want to highlight and whatever you are proud of and want to show people, like that's what should be on these accounts. So for your profile picture, like if you want to like slap on a blazer and go take a picture in front of the columns or Jesse, like that's a great look. Or if you have you know, like a different headshot that's, you know, taken outdoors or indoors, or a professional picture that you got taken at the career fair, like that's awesome too. And oh yeah, or Allie just said in the chat, sign up for the True Tiger Network headshots next week. Shameless plug. But just whatever you want that to look like. And for your cover photo, I remember when I was in school, I think I had like the columns or Jesse or like the Kansas City skyline, because that's like I knew that that's where I wanted to work. Or some people, like friends that are graphic designers or whatever, like they have created their own backgrounds, and it's just like something that they've done to express themselves. So it's really like whatever you want to make it. There's no right or wrong way to do it. And then another thing that I wanted to highlight, like between Gretchen and I, we're both Mizzou graduates, and we're also both pursuing like advanced education degrees. And so Gretchen has her Mizzou experience highlighted, but I have my like UMKC school highlighted. And so just like there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's not like, oh, it's just whatever you want to make it. And so on your guys's profile, like for your little role or employer, it might, like mine says financial analyst, internal audit at H&R Block. Yours might say like student at the University of Missouri, or like aspiring aspiring like advertisement role, like whatever you're looking for, like that can go in that slot too. Or if you're like, if you have an internship right now, like those are things that you can change and keep updating. And I think that's another thing we wanted to hit on, is just like kind of making sure that you don't have to check it like every single minute of every day, but just making sure that your profile is like relatively up to date with the things you're doing. That way, when people come to look at you, it's not like, oh, her last work experience was like, you know, 10 years ago or whatever. It's like you want to make sure that your experiences are relevant and the things that you have on your profile like match what you're currently doing. So I think that's all for this little profile section. So if we want to skip to the next slide. Okay, yes, highlights and activities. So highlights are just like right underneath like that first profile section, and activities are right underneath the highlights. And so in activities, it just kind of shows anything that you've like posted recently. So if you've liked anything, if you've commented on anything, it just shows people like any sort of activity that you've had recently, like on the platform. So that's another thing. It's like if you have friends that are posting, or if you like see a post that's really cool, like comment on those things, because when people go to your profile, they can see like, oh, she was really interested in this, or like, oh, she has a friend who just accepted a job at this employer, or things like that. And it's a really neat way to kind of support your friends and build your own network that way online. And then for highlights, it also shows you right above the activity, like if you have mutual connections with that person. So if you go to somebody's profile and in the highlights you see like, oh, this person also is connected with Gretchen and this person who I worked with at this company, and it just kind of shows you like what a small world it is. And then if you go to connect with that person or send them a message, you already know like, oh, these are the two people that we know, or like, oh, I have a common ground. Or if it's a recruiter that's already connected with one of your classmates, you can go talk to that classmate about that recruiter, about their experience. So it's just a really like easy snapshot, high level way to see like, oh, these are how, like, this is how everything is connected together. And we'll talk a little bit about like the kind of posts that you can post and like what those comments look like and what those messaging looks like a little bit later on in the presentation, but this is just kind of like a high level of what those highlights and activities are. So Gretchen, if you want to go to the next slide. Yes, the experience section. So this is kind of when you get into like the meat of what you've done. So this is like if you have a resume, like this is your work experience on your resume. So this can be like internships, any sort of like jobs you've held. You can do like leadership experiences, and you want to make sure that you have like the main things are like the employer, and then the experience bullet points, and then the time frame that you worked there. So like for me and my role in H&R Block right now, my little screenshot is on the far left of the screen, but H&R Block is my employer and I'm in a rotational program. So I'm in my third role currently. And so the very first role that I had was on the data science and analytics team. So I have that role highlighted in bold, and then underneath it, I have the dates that I worked. And then underneath that, I have bullet pointed all of the like activities or the things that I did. And you want to make sure that these words, and I'm sure that this is something that you guys have learned like when you're building your resume, but you want to make sure that these bullet points are like action things. Like what did you actually do? What was like the meat of the work you were doing? What are things that you're proud of? In this section, you can also attach things. So if you made like a really awesome video or put together a really great portfolio, like you can link those documents to your experiences to show people like, hey, this is what I've done. And then people can comment on those things too. But in your experience section, I feel like one of the questions that I have gotten a lot is like, okay, should I have things from high school on here? Like, when do you kind of like, like pass things off? Like, what kind of leadership experiences should I put here? And again, I think that, and Gretchen, you can jump in too, but I think it just kind of goes back to like, what are you proud of? Like, what do you highlight? What do you want people to know? And like, if you had a really awesome leadership experience in high school that you want to like share with people, like, I think that that's super awesome. And like, if that's something that you want to like highlight for people, then you can totally put it on there. I would just be ready to, and this is what they tell you whenever you're building your resume, it's like, if you have that experience on there, like be able to speak to it. Like I wouldn't put anything on your LinkedIn profile, and I wouldn't put anything on your resume that you can't like actually talk about. It's like, if it's on there and someone asks you about it, you should be able to be like, oh my gosh, yeah, like here's what I did there. These are the experiences that I had. Like, here's all the cool things I learned. Instead of having it be like on your, LinkedIn profile and you don't even know what's on there. It's like, this should be stuff that you're proud of, things that you know that you did, experiences that you've had, that kind of thing. And this is also an important section to like keep up to date. So if you like have an internship this summer, like when you start that internship, go ahead and put that in your experience section, and you can say that you started like this month. And then when you're finished with that internship, you can go back in and say it ended in like August or whatever. So that way you have that month time frame in there. And then I would go through and put your bullet points of like, these are the things that I did while I was in that internship. And so those are things that can constantly be updated. Or like, for me, so I'm in my internal audit rotation right now. And so whenever I like am done with one of my deliverables, it's like I can go in and add that as a bullet point. So you're slowly just kind of building on it. And I think that like that's another just like recommendation or piece of advice is like do it as you go instead of like waiting till the end of the year and then right before you're a senior trying to look for jobs and you're going back and you're like, oh my gosh, what did I do in this role? Like I did this 7 summers ago, I can't remember like what the heck was going on. It's like kind of keep it up to date, like keep your running list, keep your tally in your mind. That way you can go back to it later and you're not like flinging around last minute because you can't remember what you did. It's like really a best practice to kind of keep those things up to date as you go about doing them. Yeah, I think that's all I got for the experience section. It's our next slide. Education.
Yeah,
Okay,
you want me to jump in?
perfect. Yeah, Gretchen, I'll let you take over.
Awesome. Okay, so and I think you covered it really well, Jordan. I just want to say in the experience section too, I'm a big believer, as I've said before, in putting, to Jordan's point, what you can speak to, but as much as you can, because again, people are going to search for things, and maybe they're searching something that pulls that one high school job that meant a lot to you, you know, up to the top. So I would say as much as you can, since it also kind of folds the bottom ones under, so it's not so overwhelming to recruiters or somebody looking at your profile. But anyway, with that, to education, to Jordan's point as well, again, you can kind of see from both of our profiles, we've reordered things, and Jordan actually has the College of Business on hers, which is great, and has really specific organizations she was involved in there. So there's a lot of opportunity here. And you can probably see, you know, we've listed out a lot of different activities and societies and different organizations. And that, again, don't feel weird about or bragging. You feel like you're putting too much on, because again, this is crucial in people searching. And I'll give you one example of actually how I have gotten to the place I'm at Hallmark with my current boss. When I was interning, I went in LinkedIn and started searching people who worked at Hallmark and who were Thetas. And she was somebody who popped up at the top on LinkedIn because it was listed in one of these little education sections for her. And I reached out, we set up a coffee, and she became a mentor to me, and ended up, now I am reporting to her, and it's this great thing. So just a tip there, in that don't be afraid to list out everything you can. And for you guys right now in school, it might be more so in your experience section, but especially as you continue to move along, be sure to include all of that still in your high school blurb or your college blurb. So I'll jump now to the volunteer section. So here, kind of similar, pretty straightforward. Again, I would list out everything you can. And the cool thing about the volunteer experience section is it actually gives you different categories. So you can sort your different experiences, whether it's relating to children or poverty, or there's a lot of different categories. So definitely go through those. And you'll even see a lot of them will pull, for example, that Shadow Buddies Foundation that I'm involved with. They have a even page that this is connected to. So it's a really fun way for, if a recruiter is looking, they can actually link right through and learn more about what you're involved in. And I think the last thing I want to say here is that this is one of the few places on your profile that you can kind of show who you are, apart from just the jobs or experience you've had. You know, this is where you can say, this is what I'm passionate about, or this is what I love to do, or what, you know, fires me up. So definitely take advantage of that as well. And then, so next, there's the endorsement, recommendations, and awards section. So this part is really fun, because I'm sure you guys are all familiar with that skills and endorsement section. You can really easily like plus your friends for leadership or public speaking and all that, which is great. But additionally, the recommendation section I wanted to call out is something that I wish I would have taken advantage of in college. And it's something that I would recommend all of you, if you have an advisor or a boss of a job that you're in, or an internship or anything like that, definitely ask at the end of it, or even mid, you know, to ask for a recommendation and say, hey, and you can do it on LinkedIn, or you could, you know, send them a note separately. But this is something that stays on your profile and really stands out, I would say. And one way you can do this too, even with just a coworker, for example, I had a coworker who was kind of looking for a new job, and she wrote one for me and then said, hey, I wrote you a recommendation. Would you mind writing me one? And it's like, absolutely, you know, I'll happily. So that's a way as well. It's kind of an awkward topic, but a way to kind of provide recommendations and receive them on your LinkedIn as well. And then I couldn't move past this slide without pointing out the accomplishment section from Jordan's profile on the bottom right. Again, don't be afraid to write even the smallest. Like I had to laugh with your Woman of the Month of Johnston, Jordan.
Oh yeah. Hey, I'm proud of that.
In a total serious note, stuff like that shows your personality and connections to your college. And so people will see that and it'll mean something. So definitely don't be afraid to include as much as you can. Okay, and then I touched on this a little bit, but LinkedIn has groups and interests. I think this is really great for specifically plugging into, like, we have a Gen KC, which is the Young Professionals of Kansas City, or at Mizzou, I'm sure there's a bunch of different groups you can connect to here as well. This is also just how I keep up with industry trends in marketing communication, and I follow a lot of different agencies that will put out articles in my news feed that say, top subject lines for emails right now, and just provides a really easy way to stay connected. As well as companies that you're interested in. I think this is shows really well as well to employers who are looking through, if they're looking at Jordan's profile and they see, oh, she's really interested in Amazon and Google and Macy's. And I think it all just kind of builds who you are as a professional.
And I also like
Yeah.
jumping in on that a little bit. Like if you're interviewing for like companies or interviewing for jobs, go follow that company on LinkedIn, and then you can go to their like LinkedIn page and it shows you like the most recent news. And so that could be a really cool thing to like bring up in your interview. It's like it shows that, hey, I've been paying attention, like I've been watching your feed, I know what's going on in your company. Like if there's a CEO change or something like that, or like a really big like milestone that the company just hit, like that really stands out to recruiters. Like if you're in an interview and you can speak like highly or speak intelligently about things that are going on in that company's world.
Yeah, that's great. And Jordan, to that point too, I think LinkedIn is great in that you can see in a company who's you're connected to, who's working there as well. So while you're looking for those different articles or news sources, you can kind of see anybody you could reach out to for a referral or recommendation too. So many benefits to LinkedIn. Awesome. So next, we just wanted to cover too, there's a few other nuances of LinkedIn with these additional features. So first is posts, and we've talked about this a little bit, but there's a lot of different things you can do with that. And I would say people have gotten really creative too with building a professional network. And I know that even you guys might be familiar with Relevant Youth does a really great job of this and putting out content and recommendations. And I would say we'll provide some examples in the next slide too, but definitely take advantage of that feature and the visibility you can get with that. Next, direct messages. I am a huge proponent of direct messages on LinkedIn, and I'll give you guys some examples of when I was in school. I remember I was trying to figure out what the heck I wanted to do. I had no idea. And I ended up just through that search functionality looking for people who had similar clubs I was in college, and then people who worked at Google, at Starbucks, at some of the biggest companies. And just messaged, said, hey, I'm involved in XYZ that I saw you were as well in college. Could we set up a 30-minute phone call just to pick your brain? And the conversations that came out of those were really awesome. So don't be afraid to like shoot for the moon, shoot for the stars, talk to people that you think are way, way, far away, even across the world, because that's the cool part of LinkedIn is provides this really easy access for these professional mentorships and relationships. And then to that point, the connections and network again is really crucial in providing some of that search functionality when you appear at the top, or helps pull in different articles. Your friends will like things, comment on things that'll be pulled into your news feed. So definitely, I would say connect with as many people as you can. And then post ideas. So we threw in a couple here. And again, this is something that I've always kind of struggled with. And maybe you have too, Jordan, just with like, oh, I hate posting about myself. But the LinkedIn platform provides a really fun and easy way to show a conference you went to, for example, and kind of showing, hey, this part of the conference really meant a lot to me, or I learned this. Additionally, on the left, like Hallmark put out an article about how they're giving away free cards. And that was something that I shared and kind of commented on. So you can share different articles or different things that mean a lot to you, or events. And then something I also wanted to point out was on the bottom, I got the chance to speak with one of my mentors at Hallmark, Mallory Basca, in a couple Mizzou classes for upper level marketing. And this is something that she taught me that, especially, it's kind of funny, but for LinkedIn, you have to ask people to take a photo so you can share it. And it feels kind of weird, but I just wanted to encourage you guys that, if you're doing something really fun, or you're speaking at something, or even if you're just volunteering somewhere and want to show on LinkedIn what you're involved in and passionate about, ask somebody to take a quick photo just so you can share that. And I think it's kind of a weird thing to do, but it means a lot to share with friends and professional network that this is what means a lot to me. Mizzou means a lot to me, and I love that I still get to speak to Mizzou students. And then with this, I'm actually going to hand it back to Jordan to talk through a few more cool parts of how you can keep your LinkedIn up to date.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things that we would also recommend, like pro tip for LinkedIn, is changing your URL. So if you just create an account on LinkedIn, just cold turkey, your URL, so like the link that you send to other people to get to your account, on the end it'll say like LinkedIn // and then it'll have a bunch of like random letters and numbers at the end. But you can actually change that random numbers and letters at the end to be your name. So that way, when you send the link to people, it'll say linkedin.com / Gretchen Metzger or / Jordan Eskejian. And that's just kind of like an easier way to send it to people. And so to do that, Gretchen has like the screen shared up. And so there's a circle and it says edit, edit your profile URL. And so you just click on that, edit and customize your URL, and then you can customize it to be your first and last name. Or if you have like a generic first and last name, you can do like your first initial and then your last name, or like your add a 1 at the end of it or something like that. But that's just like a neat way to stick out. And then if you, now a lot of people are putting their like LinkedIn URL on their resume, or like attaching it to a lot of things, like maybe in a Facebook post or something, if you're looking for jobs that way. And it looks a little bit nicer of having the LinkedIn / your name instead of like all of these random characters. So that was just kind of a pro tip that we found and wanted to share with you guys. And then if you flip to your next screen, okay, perfect. So changing the profile settings and privacy, I know that this is another one of those things that kind of falls into the whatever you're comfortable with. But one of the things that Gretchen and I would recommend to you guys is like LinkedIn is a tool that you can use like to be recruited. And so like recruiters and companies are like looking specifically at this profile. So we would recommend that you share your profile like with everybody. So it's like the more people that you're willing to share your profile with, the more people will see it and the more visibility that you will have. And so that's just one of the things you can do. There's different privacy settings that you can change. But with that being said, if you're like working on your experience section, or if you're working on your awards section, you can close that for a little bit and take a day to like make it look exactly how you want it, and then flip the switch and make it visible to everyone again. So these are just like a few little tools, tips and tricks that we wanted to show you guys. That way you don't feel like overwhelmed, like, oh my goodness, I need to completely go in here and do a full like LinkedIn profile revamp. Like, that's great, go do that, but don't feel like you have to do it all at once. Like, you have the ability to kind of hide things and show things like as you see fit, and as you feel comfortable and more confident in the things that you have out there. So that was just another thing that we wanted to share with the profile settings and privacy. And then if we go forward, this last slide. So we talked a little bit about making connections, and Gretchen talked about like being a big fan of DMs. I am also a big fan of DMs. One of like kind of the best practices when you're building connections, you don't always just have to like connect with like people that you know, like your best friends. It's like you can reach out and connect with those executives, with people that you saw speak on a panel, with different professionals, with people you interview with. It's like after an interview or after you attend a really cool event or panel and you're taking notes on those discussions, you can reach out to those people and connect with them, even if you didn't like speak to them directly. And so just a great way to do that. So H&R Block, the CFO or the chief financial officer of the company, is a Mizzou grad, and his name is Tony Bowen. And so whenever I was going through the interview process, like he was one of our like rounds in the interview. And so, you know, when you come back from that interview, you go home and you're like writing your thank you notes to the people that interviewed you for the opportunity, and just like telling them what you learned. One of the things you can do in addition to that is go back to LinkedIn, find their profile and connect with them. But connect with them and add a message to that connection. So that way, whenever they get your request to connect, it's not just like, oh, here's this person that wants to connect with me. They'll see that message too. And that's just another way to kind of elevate your connection, or like, put you above, differentiate you from the other people who are applying or the other people who are interviewing. And in that message to the person you want to connect to, it's a really awesome thing when you can like kind of differentiate yourself again and say like, hi, Tony, or hi, whoever, like, I really enjoyed the panel that you were a part of, or it was such an honor to meet you in that interview. Your words about whatever XYZ, whatever you said on this panel were super impactful to me, or like, I really appreciate the honest advice that you gave me, or just like add something that's personal. And then like, thanks so much for meeting with me, or thank you so much for letting me be a part of that panel, or whatever like that last sentence is that you want to be. I'm looking forward to the future. I'm so excited for all that lies ahead. Anything like that are just like really great things to say and show how like excited and involved you are. And then at the end, you can sign your name and you send off that connection. And I just think that like, I don't think I've ever sent a message like that to someone, even if I didn't speak to them on the panel, even if I was just like one person at a big Gen KC event. And they always respond, and they're always just like, oh my gosh, thanks so much for reaching out. Like, I'm so glad that like touched you. Like, that's a really awesome thing. Like, where are you located geographically? Like, would love to hop on a call. Like, it's crazy how many doors open when you just like add a little note and say thank you, or add a little note and let people know like how they've impacted you. So that's like kind of a best practice that Gretchen and I wanted to make sure that we like threw out there. It's like, don't be afraid to connect with people with like big titles. It's like, they'll see that you're a student, and they'll see that you're young and excited, and like that just shows so much promise for you. So after you've attended a cool event, after you've met somebody new, after you work with somebody on a project, like, go ahead and make that connection and make sure that you add a neat little message. And then
hey, Jordan, can I add one thing too? I would
Mhm.
recommend also connecting with your professors, which might be kind of like, why would I do that? I see them every day. But some of those connections have meant the most. And I see their articles or their different speakers that have come to their classes and made connections that way, and thought, oh, somebody just came and spoke to Courtney Cothran's upper level marketing class. I would love to learn what she's doing on her side of marketing. So even in school, it meant a lot to kind of see what they shared. So I would recommend that as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks, Gretch. And then I think that that's all we had for you guys, but we have our bullet pointed. Connect with us on LinkedIn. Put to work some of those tips and tricks that we gave you guys. And if you guys have any questions at all, like, you can ask now, or like Allie has our contact information too. Like, we would just be so honored and excited to help you in any way that we can. But yeah.